Like I've said before, a lot of those critics over at Rotten Tomatoes, they don't really like horror movies like we do. So today I want to go through how Rotten Tomatoes ranks the entire Final Destination franchise and whether or not I agree with it. And just a reminder, this ranking will be sorted by the lowest tomato meter score to the highest tomato meter score. And very similar to the Friday the 13th franchise, which had only one movie considered fresh in that entire franchise, Final Destination also only has one movie that Rotten Tomatoes considers fresh in the franchise, which is when at least 60% of the reviews for that movie are positive. So, all right, how the hell does Rotten Tomatoes rank the entire Final Destination franchise? Well, coming in last place at number 5 is going to be The Final Destination, or Final Destination 4, whatever you want to call it, from 2009. Coming in with a 28% tomato meter score and a 35% audience score. And the critics' consensus for this one goes, with little of the ingenuity of previous installments, The Final Destination is predictable, disposable horror fare. And I mean, I get where they're coming from. I mean, there's not a lot of ingenuity in this movie, and we'll get into all of that. Definitely very predictable. And you know what we like to do for the movies that are in last place especially, I like to read a few critic reviews. So let's go ahead and do that really fast. So the first critic came in and said, Final Destination 4, The Final Destination, was fresh. And they said, although it lacks ambition and is comically daft as pure popcorn cinema goes, this splatterfest delivers exactly what it should. Tension, mayhem, and an unhealthy body count. I mean, there is a high body count, of course. I mean, that's without a doubt. Tension, though, I definitely do not think this movie has a lot of tension in it, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But, I mean, yeah, it's Final Destination, so pure popcorn cinema. It's a pretty good way to put it. All right, the next critic came in and said it was rotten, and they were nice enough to give The Final Destination a 0.5 out of 4. Very generous of them. And they said, The Final Destination is the movie equivalent of a struggling strip mall store wedged between Metro PCS and a pawn shop. Someone please foreclose. And I mean, I get what they're saying. If you like going into this movie, and probably a lot of you after watching this movie were kind of thinking the same thing. You're like, can this franchise just be over? Because this movie doesn't give us a lot that's new and fresh, even though, I mean, there are some cool kills here and there. But yes, okay, The Final Destination. So yeah, director David R. Ellis from the second movie is back, along with Eric Bress, who also helped write the second movie. So this is the first 3D movie in the franchise. Obviously, this was during a time where we were seeing a ton of 3D movies all over the place. And surprisingly, this is actually still, to this day, the highest grossing Final Destination movie in the franchise. It made about almost $190 million worldwide. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, as a pretty big Final Destination fan, it's definitely a guilty pleasure for me. It kind of saddens me and pains me to say that this movie is mostly just ass. I mean, we're 4 movies in, and what are they gonna do to kind of surprise us? What's something kind of unique that they're gonna give us in the franchise, in this movie, right? To kind of throw us a curveball. Well, guess what, guys? The main character finds articles about people having visions very similar to his, and guess what? If you intervene, you might also be able to survive. Wow. And what's a little bit different about this one compared to some of the other movies in the franchise, instead of hunches or feelings or little flashes that are kind of, hard to decipher and stuff, in this one, the main character is constantly having flashes all the time. And to me, I'm sitting there watching the movie thinking, these are kind of obvious. They're giving you a lot here, but still, the character's not really able to figure anything out. But yes, this movie, so, Final Destination. So what's the big opening sequence in this movie? So if you've seen the movie, obviously, this is the NASCAR movie, which is well known. I think a lot of people, when I talk about the Final Destination franchise, or I hear people talking about it, that's one of the openings that comes up a lot. And yeah, it's very gory. Yeah, it's a little bit unique, sort of, in the franchise. But to me, there's no real buildup. It happens very quickly. I would say it's probably the quickest or the shortest buildup to just like everything that happens, the explosions and the deaths and everything like that. They don't really give you any reason to, I mean, it's Final Destination, so are you supposed to care about the characters? I mean, not really, but still, like, kind of know where they're coming from. Like in some of the previous movies, they're classmates, they're friends, they have some history together. You kind of know what's going on a little bit. In this one, they just throw you right into it. And yeah, kind of like I mentioned earlier, this whole movie has virtually no suspense to me. And this opening is not really all that much different. There's really no suspense in my opinion. Plus, I think in the previous movies and most of the movies just in general, you know, in the opening, especially the actors and the characters are just better overall. But on a positive note, we get to be, you know, reunited with Bubba from Forrest Gump in this movie and in the introduction, of course. And, you know, Bubba, poor old Bubba, went from being like this shrimp tycoon to now working security at a speedway. So, poor guy. But another huge gripe that I have with this movie is, of course, it's Final Destination. So what do we care about? We want to see people get killed in crazy, inventive ways. And in this movie, a lot of the kills are just a letdown, in my opinion. Like that one guy at the car shop gets killed through the fence. It's like a cheese grater type of a kill. I mean, that kill is kind of like just okay. And one of the like biggest kills that people remember from this movie is the pool kill, right? The pool drain kill. And to me, even that kill, I sit back and I say to myself, I mean, it's kind of cool, but it could have been better. I do, though, like the whole movie theater sequence kind of a thing. It's got a little bit of a meta aspect to it as well. Got a nice little explosion, some other things going on, a little bit of tension here. But honestly, the best part of that whole scene is when the guy, the usher, is like, everybody go to the exits peacefully and calmly, and then just gets blown away like a rag doll. That's pretty hilarious to me. But to me, I'd probably say my favorite kill in the movie is Laurie's death in the vision, which doesn't actually end up happening, where she gets killed in arguably one of the dirtiest places you could possibly imagine, which is an escalator at a mall. She just gets grinded up in there. It's all kinds of nasty, and it's pretty damn effective to me. But really, though, like I said earlier, I mean, yeah, this is Final Destination. So is the acting bar in this franchise set at like an Oscar level? No, but to me, honestly, throughout the franchise, some of the acting is okay. It's like serviceable and pretty solid. But this movie, The Final Destination, to me is the worst acting in the entire franchise. And also, like, of course, like I said, one of the biggest things of this is Final Destination are the kills. And I can't help but watch this movie and just think, man, that kill could have been better. That kill could have been better. They just could have done better. So do I agree with The Final Destination being last place according to Rotten Tomatoes? Yeah, I actually do agree. I also have this movie last place on my list. All right, up next at number 4 is going to be Final Destination from 2000, coming in with a 37% tomato meter score and a 68% audience score. The critics' consensus goes, despite a panel of X-Files alums at the helm and a promising premise, flighty performances and poor execution keep Final Destination from ever taking off. I see what you did there, but I would disagree. Regardless, I think the execution on the original is very good. There's some basic premises here, and I think they pull it off very well. There's a lot of scenes, there's not a lot happening, but you still find yourself, I still find myself tense and locked in. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But of course, here we go. Flight 180, the movie that kicked off everything. And yeah, the original Final Destination kind of has an interesting kind of like origin in a way. And a lot of people know this story. It was kind of like a spec script for the X-Files, essentially, written by Jeffrey Riddick, who was a writer on this movie as well. To be an episode, basically. He wanted to get a TV agent, and that was kind of his way to try to go about doing that. And one of his friends at New Line Cinema basically persuaded him to kind of pursue this into a feature movie and write it as a feature movie. And of course, that's what ended up happening, right? So what's interesting about it too for me is this is pre-Saw. This is pre-Hostel. This is pre-Texas Chainsaw Remake. So, you know, that gore and that feel of it is not quite at that point in the genre yet. This is kind of like a bridge. This movie, I look at this movie as like a bridge between like the 90s horror and that 2000s horror that we immediately think about when we think about the 2000s horror, you know? The super gory, over the top. And of course, like, this movie is gory without a doubt, but when you compare it to the other movies in the franchise, the gore isn't on that level. So it's a cool little like bridge, like I said, between those different eras in horror, which is great. And also to kind of piggyback off of what I talked about a second ago, what's great too, and I really enjoy in this movie, is there's a lot of moments where seemingly nothing is happening. People are just doing ordinary things, and I think director James Wong does a great job immediately putting you on an edge in this movie with the music, the little subtle like coincidences, just the vibe of the overall scene. And of course, Devon Sawa's acting as well on top of that in those scenes is really good. And I don't know, it just makes things very tense. So when you think about this movie when people say this movie is like more plain than some of the other Final Destination movies or just plain in general, I wouldn't agree with that, because I still think when nothing really is going on, there's a lot of tension. But yeah, this movie, and like a lot of other movies in this franchise, of course, but this movie in particular is a pure just 2000s time capsule to me. I feel like I can just smell the Abercrombie Fierce cologne through the screen. And I have to mention that, yeah, this movie does have the advantage of being the first movie in the franchise, so there's still that mystery around what's going on. Why did these people survive? There's got to be a reason, right? And then this whole underlying story about like fate. Can you change it? Is it just inevitable? What's the story behind that? And also, I think the original Final Destination does a really good job, James Wong does, of keeping you hanging on and I find myself wanting to find out, why Alex is having these visions and how is he having these visions. I also want to find out like what's going on with Clear. And that first kill after the plane crash is just classic Final Destination. Like I said earlier, there's really nothing going on. Like this dude, Todd, is just kind of manscaping a little bit, but we're getting like all these little fake outs, and with the music and everything going on, you're thinking like, okay, something seems off here. Something's going to happen to this kid. Because it's the first movie in the franchise, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Of course, later on in the franchise, it becomes way more predictable, but things are just happening. The water is seeping out. And then that whole scene where he does get killed is brutal. He's strangling in the shower there. You can just feel the struggle, man. It's very tense for me. His eyes turn red, and it's just a crazy scene. And when you see the water go back, it kind of adds that little extra to it, because you're like, damn, now everybody's going to think that he just killed himself. It adds a little extra layer to it. And I can't help but think about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, when Jesse is being possessed by Freddy. Freddy's killing people and Jesse's being basically framed for this. I don't know. I find myself having a similar feeling with Todd's kill and with Jesse. You're like, damn, no, that's not the real story. In this movie, we also get to meet Tony Todd for the first time, which is great. I think he's a fun character. Yeah, I wish he was utilized a little bit more in the franchise, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But he also gives us that hilarious line in this movie, and he's like, and you don't even want to fuck with that Mac Daddy. What? What I also like about the Final Destination franchise, just in general, and in this movie in particular, is I mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street earlier, but it's very similar in the same way. It's like you've got this thing going on, and the only people that know about it, especially in this movie, are high school kids or just young kids. And it's a story that their parents are not going to believe. It's a story the cops are not going to believe. So we follow these young kids trying to kind of figure out how to solve this massive problem when nobody believes them. And I like that aspect of the story. And just in general, that's something I always have a good time with. And yeah, a second ago, I did mention Devon Sawa, who's a great actor. Love him in this movie. Big fan of his, always have been, ever since I saw him in like Little Giants back in the day. I've been a big fan of what he does, and he's great in this movie as well. But I will say, I do think the way that they wrote Sean William Scott's character in this could have been a lot better. He just doesn't seem like he fits at all with his character. Doesn't even seem like he belongs in his character's skin. I also think the bully guy, jock, bully guy, whatever you want to call him, Carter, I just don't think he was like that believable of a bully to me. Kind of seemed a little bit corny. I think they could have done a little bit of a better job with that character too. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, this is by far the least gory Final Destination movie in the franchise, but we still get some fun kills, some good jump scares, like when Terry gets ran over by the bus. What a great jump scare. Also, like I love after, Billy's head gets chopped off, Alex is just kind of like forgets about it instantly. And I know He's probably a little desensitized at this point, but he's just like, his head gets chopped off, and then he just starts going into like game planning the next move. He's like, yeah, no big deal, don't worry about him. What's also cool about the original Final Destination is if you have a friend or a family member who's not into horror, or maybe like gets squeamish easily, or doesn't like things too jumpy or too scary, this is the one Final Destination movie that they could watch and I feel like still have a good time with, because it's just tense and it's just shot really well and acted pretty solid, and it's just a fun movie just in general. Like, I feel like this is a movie I could show to like my mom, maybe Warner, you know, about a couple scenes here and there, but overall just like a fun, tense movie that's not too over the top for somebody who's not into the genre, not really, you know, as sick as we are with the gore. But I will say also, having the last kill of a Final Destination movie, when I go back and watch this movie, happen off screen, that always kind of throws me off a little bit. I mean, I don't hate it. That's a little bit of a nitpick, but still, the original Final Destination, like I said, the least gory movie in the franchise by a mile, but James Wan just does such a great job with the tension and the characters and making you want to figure out and sit around to just find out what's going to happen to everybody. And I have a great time with the original Final Destination. So, do I agree with the original Final Destination from 2000 being number 4 according to Rotten Tomatoes? I do not agree. I actually have the original at number 2 on my list. So there you go. Final Destination from 2000, according to Rotten Tomatoes, coming in at number 4. Okay, up next at number 3 is going to be Final Destination 3 from 2006, coming in with a 43% tomato meter score and a 57% audience score. The critics' consensus for this one goes, Final Destination 3 is more of the same, gory and pointless with nowhere new to go. And yeah, I mean, there's more of the same, but I would disagree. This movie has a great opening sequence, and it's a lot of fun. I really like this movie a lot. So yeah, in the third movie from 2006, we've got James Wan, the director of the original movie, coming back for this one. And a big theme with this one is just control. It's like whether or not we're in control of our lives, of our death, of our destiny, really. But yeah, just losing control and how that feels. And I think James Wan does a great job portraying that on the screen in this movie. And this is the roller coaster movie. That's the intro to this movie. It's also kind of like the digital camera aspect, which I have to say, as somebody who lugged around a big ass digital camera in his pocket many weekends in the 2000s, I'm glad to see that dragging one of those things around actually paid off for somebody a little bit. So, but yeah, the big roller coaster to open this movie, which I really enjoy. It's great. It kind of climaxes at about like 15 minutes in. So I think James Wan does a good job kind of building that. In this one, they took a little bit of a different approach than the second movie. And in this one, it's, kids that go to school together. So they kind of know each other a little bit. They've got a little bit of a backstory, and they dive into that a little bit along the way, like kind of who's dating who's kind of got beef with who's the nerd, who's the jock. And, it just kind of builds. I like that. And I think there's some good tension before everything goes down. And I mean, who hasn't been on a roller coaster? This is something we can relate to. I mean, I am somebody who has almost fallen off a roller coaster, and I'm pretty sure I would have died. It was very close. So to me, this is kind of a relatable story in a way. Of course, not to this extent, but like the fear that some of these people could feel, like I could feel a little bit of that through the screen just for me. This isn't the roller coaster that I almost died on, but I grew up going to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, where they filmed The Lost Boys, all that kind of stuff. There's a ride there called the Giant Dipper, an old wooden roller coaster, sketchy as hell. Every time you ride it, it feels like you are going to die. But I can't help but think about rides like that when I watch this movie, and it's just great. And I think with this intro, they do a great job kind of making you feel like you're on the ride, despite all the green screen stuff going on. I think it's pretty believable and looks great. I mean, and they do a really good job, like I kind of mentioned, just making you feel out of control, which when you're on a ride like this, I mean, that's one of the places you definitely feel completely out of control, because if something goes down, something goes wrong, what are you going to do? You're strapped in. Like the people running the ride they're like kids half the time. Plus, the louder you scream, the better of a time they think you're just having. So it's like, you're completely out of control on a ride like this. And for a franchise that has some completely silly, ridiculous characters, has a lot of like kind of that like frat boy type of script writing and things like that, I don't think this franchise, and I don't think this movie gets enough credit for how well some of these scenes are pulled off. I think it's very effective. And this roller coaster scene to me is just a damn good time. I also think it's kind of hilarious, like the whole vision and how everything goes down is because of the guy says, "Show me your titties," and tries to get it on camera. And that's kind of how everyone dies in the vision. I think it's pretty hilarious. So yeah, the big question is, how are the kills in Final Destination 3? And to me, I think the kills are a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, in the opening, of course, on the roller coaster, we get some great gore. It's unique, it's brutal, it's tense. Really enjoy the kills in the opening there, but also we get the tanning bed kill in this movie, which, yeah, is completely silly and ridiculous and basically unbelievable in every sort of a way, but is also a good time, especially because in this era, it seemed like everybody was tanning. There was a tanning salon on like every single corner, and it just got out of hand. So, you know, it plays into the era, which is a good time. We also get that little cut between like the tanning beds on fire and their caskets. That's a cool little transition, which has always been something that I remember from this movie. The jock getting his head crushed in the gym. That's a fun scene with some fake out, some anxiety from all the loud noises, the weights being thrown around and all that, but just overall a fun, gory ass kill, even though I wish they would have stuck with the practical effects that they covered up with CGI. Also the kill in the Home Depot. You know, the Home Depot, home improvement type of a store. I mean, I think that's fun. There's some funny, hilarious, ridiculous stuff going on there with like the forklift, how that takes off, you know, on its own. There's shit flying everywhere. And then the girl kind of unexpectedly gets killed with the nail gun. I think it's just classic Final Destination. And yeah, the second you show up in a Home Depot type of a place, you're like, oh shit, all right, here we go. We also have that kill in the drive-thru where they're kind of trapped in the drive-thru and the truck is coming to smash them. They just barely get away. But that kill is brutal. I mean, where the fan of the engine, I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but I think it was the fan goes into the back of the guy's skull, and it's just, the sound effects to me are perfect. It's so crunchy and juicy. And I will say this is one of my favorite casts in the entire franchise, but you know, the way Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character, Wendy, is written for a lot of this movie, I don't know, it is believable at times because, I mean, obviously there's like all this horrible shit happening, but still, her character in this movie is a little bit too whiny to me at times too, does a little bit too much crying for a movie. You know, that's just supposed to be entertaining. It's just a little bit much to me. But I am a big fan of Mary Elizabeth Winstead, just in general, though. She's a great actor. You know, she's been in a lot of horror movies in the past, and I like what she does, and I think she's good overall in this movie. I also think Ryan Merriman is an underrated actor, too, and kind of plays well and has some good chemistry with Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character, and I just think they're good together, and I like him as an actor, too, and I think he's solid in this movie. And I know probably a lot of people don't really like Ian's character all that much, but I think he's a funny character. He's kind of that underachieving, sarcastic, kind of like pessimistic character, which to me always fits pretty damn solid into a movie like this. So yeah, at the end of this movie, we're at this whole like McKinley patriotic tricentennial thing. We get some funny moments there, some good fake outs, some good gore. I also think it's funny how McKinley gets killed. Yeah, he has kind of probably a lot of time to get out of the way of getting completely smashed, but he gets crushed, which is hilarious, but also like his twitching corpse is also like kind of flipping us off at the same time, which I feel like is pretty on brand for his character and kind of hilarious. And then of course, like in this movie, we cut to 5 months later, which is always a scene in Final Destination that I look forward to. I like that. And this one's a good time. You've got like Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character with some of the other characters, and it's a metro scene. Of course, the metro is going to crash and shit's going to go down, which to me is something that I enjoy as somebody who's ridden a lot of subways in his life. I think it's a fun scene. It's something that I just personally really enjoy. But yeah, Final Destination 3, this is really the Final Destination movie that's just like perfect to watch in the summer. You know what I mean? You've got the tricentennial thing, you got the opening at the roller coaster. It just has like a lot of summer vibes to it. But overall, yeah, Final Destination 3 is definitely a guilty pleasure for me. It's a lot of fun, great kills, a great opening, some fun characters. Yeah, some annoying characters at the same time, of course, but overall, just a really damn good time. So, do I agree with Rotten Tomatoes having Final Destination 3 at number 3? I actually agree. Yeah, I also have number 3 at number 3. All right, moving into the top 2. Up next at number 2 is going to be Final Destination 2 from 2003, coming in with a 50% tomato meter score and a 58% audience score. The critics' consensus for this one goes, this sequel is little more than an excuse to stage elaborate, gory scenes of characters getting killed off. And yeah, you bet your ass it is, but I will say in the second movie, I think there's more to it than that, and we'll get into all of that. This is like the sequel in the franchise that feels so intertwined in the lore of the franchise, what happened in the first movie in so many ways, which I really like, and we'll talk about that more in a second. But so the events of Final Destination 2 take place 1 year after Flight 180 and everything that went down with that, of course. And I like the intro to Final Destination 2. You've got like this newscaster interviewing somebody who seems like some people would consider him like a conspiracy theorist or a skeptic or whatever you want to say, but I think it's effective, and the guy kind of makes you feel eerie and makes you like kind of want to question the things that happen just every day to us. It also kind of ties in what happens in a good way between the first and the second movie to me. And some of you have heard me say this before, but I'm a big fan of part twos that follow up a part one that I really like and continue the story. They kind of build upon the story and keep kind of intertwining what happened in the original with what's happening in the second story. And I enjoy that with the second story. I mean, I think when you're following up a first movie like this, unless you're just going full-blown like anthology route, I think this is a great way to do it. And also towards the back half of the movie, they also do this interesting thing in part two of where they kind of like intertwine that because of the events from Flight 180, all of them were actually supposed to die. They all have their own like unique story about how like coincidentally all of them narrowly escaped death not that long ago. So come to find out, they were actually supposed to die anyways. And yes, this is the movie with the logging scene, the big pile up on the freeway. And anytime a movie can make you never forget about something, basically as long as you live, and impact something that we kind of do on a day-to-day basis, I mean, there's something like pretty iconic about that. Of course, Jaws completely changed how people swim in the water, how people kind of relate to the ocean in a way. And yeah, this is not on that level, of course, but I mean, come on. There's not a single one of you watching that has seen this movie that when you're behind a logging truck, you don't immediately change lanes. Don't lie to me. But I also just think the build up to the opening scene is great. Like, it's kind of sunny, but the road is also like a little bit wet at the same time. You see like the cop's coffee cup that's like definitely gonna pour over. That gives you like a little bit of anxiety. And there's just all these little things that just give me like a little bit of anxiety. They raise my heart rate slowly and slowly and slowly. Her transmission fluid is leaking. You're seeing all these little small things. People are cutting them off. They're almost getting into crashes. It's just like, all right, I'm ready. And I think David Ellis does a good job not letting you know what exactly is going to happen. In the beginning of the opening scene, we only see the logging truck for just a second. Like, it's not very obvious. Oh, they're going to crash on this plane probably. Oh, they're probably going to die on this roller coaster. No, they don't make it very obvious until later on in the scene. Also, I mean, the gore in this entire pileup is a really good time. Of course, you got the cop who just gets his head sent to Mars through the back of his windshield, essentially, which is fun. It's gory. The biker guy just gets completely crushed. I also love how it seems like every car on this pileup is like stocked with like 3 tons of dynamite. And yeah, of course, the kills in this movie just keep going and keep going. And I think they're a lot of fun. I also think the ladder kill is a good time. It's hilarious to me. Also, another thing that makes you think about it right away, you know, you put your hand in the disposal. Can't help but think about this movie every single time because of that. But there's some serious anxiety going on. His hand's in the disposal. The dude just won the lottery. His microwave's going crazy. There's a fire on his stove. Everything's going on. It's just like, just all this just hectic stuff happening. And then you think he's safe. And in typical Final Destination fashion, nope. The ladder goes straight through his eye. It also kind of adds to the scene that the actor in that scene plays a guy in one of the biggest piles of dog shit movies in the horror genre, I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. By the way, whose brilliant idea was it to meet at the cop's apartment? This like industrial modern apartment with like decorative spears on the wall, and this guy's got like a kayak hanging down. He's got like all kinds of sharp and gnarly shit all over the place. Like, come on, guys. This isn't the right place. We should have been in Clear's room. Just huddled up in there, you know, nice, soft, and cozy. And this movie is like the epitome of those scenes that are completely silly and ridiculous that just lead to these great, memorable kills. Like the girl who's in the van and they accidentally send off the airbag, which sends her head through the pipe in the back of her seat. Hilarious. It's like, you idiot. And then the news van gets blown up, which sends like this barbed wire fence through the guy who's like snorting coke throughout the entire movie. Slices him all to pieces. It's just a damn good time. And of course, this is Final Destination. We can't have a corny little happy ending to end this movie. They're at the barbecue, reminiscing about good times with the other family, and then Brian, the kid just gets blown to hell. His arm falls on the mom's dinner plate. Just a hilarious scene and the epitome of how a Final Destination movie should end. All right, so do I agree with Final Destination 2 being ranked number 2 according to Rotten Tomatoes? I disagree. I actually have Final Destination 2 as number 1 in the franchise. All right, of course, coming in at number 1 is going to be Final Destination 5 from 2011, coming in fresh with a 63% in the Tomato Meter score and a 53% audience score. The critics' consensus for this one goes, it's still only for the gore-thirsty faithful, but Final Destination 5 represents a surprising return to form for the franchise. Yeah, I agree with some of that. I mean, yes, at its core, this is really just for the gore-thirsty like us. And yeah, I mean, being the 5th movie in the franchise, they do some things in this movie that are pretty good, and I like that. They do take a little swing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, although not pulled off all that well. But let's go ahead and read a couple critic reviews real fast. The first critic said this movie was fresh. They gave it a 4 out of 5. And they said, inventive, superbly acted, and featuring some terrific special effects work. This is a hugely entertaining, suitably grisly thriller that's much, much better than that 5 might lead you to expect. And like I said, yeah, it's pretty impressive. It's the 5th one, and it's pretty decent. And I agree, the special effects are great in some scenes in this movie, definitely. The next critic said this movie was rotten, and they said, the opening credits sequence is a work of mad genius. And then, unfortunately, the movie starts. And I do agree with some of that. The middle chunk of this movie, not great. That opening, though, holy shit. So yeah, this movie kind of fits into a little bit of like a V shape for me. Great opening. Like, insane on the bridge. Are you kidding me? Some of the best effects in this entire franchise, without a doubt. The visuals on that whole scene are incredible. And then the middle of the movie, down. Don't care about the characters. Don't care about the backstories. I don't give a shit about Paris. Just leave me alone. Enough about Paris. I don't care. But then the end of the movie picks right back up and is a good time, in my opinion, and ends in a very solid Final Destination kind of a way. So yeah, this movie's kind of a bit of a prequel, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But yeah, like I said, the bridge opening. So we've got this whole, we're following these people who are just completely unlikable, ridiculous characters in a lot of ways, but they're on like a work retreat thing. They're going on a bus, they're going over this bridge, and immediately to me, the script and the acting and all that is horrendously bad. But fortunately, I kind of forget about a lot of that because of this whole scene. As somebody who definitely has a fear of heights, as somebody who grew up in Northern California, hearing about the earthquakes, hearing about the bridges collapse, crossing a lot of bridges here and there when I'm visiting the Bay Area and other places like that, I can relate to some of this. And it's a scary ass scene in a lot of ways. But yeah, the effects are just great in this. I mean, that whole shot when the two dudes are trying to jump across onto the railing and the bridge is collapsing piece by piece by piece on that big wide shot behind them, that's great. And then when Peter gets impaled by the metal rod in his face and one of the eyes kind of droops and then he falls down and just kind of nicks the foundation of the bridge and it splatters and he falls into the water, that kind of just caps off everything. It is a crazy ass, great opening sequence. Easily one of the best openings in the entire franchise. And I think a part of the reason this movie gets a lot of praise, especially from critics in the franchise just in general, is because they do implement something new. They implement this kill or be killed kind of a concept, which actually, to me, I think is a pretty damn smart idea to finally write into the script not only a character that could potentially just go completely unhinged from everything going off. I mean, we do have that character from the second movie that tries to, like shoot himself, but they don't go like full blown with that aspect of it. So I do like it how they have this like guy who's like a Tom Cruise doppelganger just completely loses it. And he's like, I'm actually going to kill one of you and it's going to be your girlfriend because she deserves to die. She doesn't deserve to live more than we do. And I like that aspect. I think they took a swing with it. And I think it's actually a smart idea. The whole execution of it, that's a different story to me because like I said, this movie kind of fits into that V shape. So in the middle of the movie, they're trying to explore the backstories with the characters. You got a couple characters that are dating. I could give two shits about characters that are like, they're also thinking about moving to Paris together, but they're going to break up. And it's like, I just don't care. but yes, and then we have a character who's trying to kill the girlfriend, and I don't really care, but still a concept that I think could be pretty effective. One of the biggest gripes I have about this movie, though, is it has a hard time knowing what it is, which is weird for a Final Destination movie. So the opening, where we're meeting a lot of these characters, the dialogue and everything going on is completely silly and completely ridiculous. So you're like, oh, okay, that's what this movie's gonna be. It's gonna be a schlocky, bloody good time. But then towards kind of the middle part of the movie, they try to get into this. They spend so much time on like this love story, more serious stuff. And then it tries to have like this shootout, kind of veering more into like a thriller aspect. And then it goes back to silliness. It's like, what is going on here, guys? But we do get some good kills that are very memorable to me in this movie. The gymnastics death, I'll always remember that. It's hilarious. The horny nerd, who is a completely ridiculous character. But he gets killed in the massage parlor, looking for a happy ending or two. He thinks he's safe from the fire, and then his head gets smashed by the little Buddha guy. We get the LASIK scene. That's great. I think the effects are fun. And just overall, I just think that's a very fun death. And one of the more memorable deaths in the franchise, which does, kind of give this movie a little something extra. But like I said, in the middle of the movie, we're sitting here watching these characters essentially sitting on the set of Office Space, mourning all these people that we don't care about. And I'm just sitting there I don't give a shit. But regardless, I can't lie. I think this movie ends on a very fun note. So we kick forward 2 weeks later, and Flight 180 is back. They are on Flight 180. And I think during this whole scene, there's some good effects here too. I couldn't help but think about when Sam gets nice and crispy. I couldn't help but think about that scene in Terminator 2, the burning scene with the person holding onto the fence. It's very gnarly. He gets very crispy. And then it's fun. We cut to the bar, and everybody's, I guess, sort of mourning the guy that I think everybody secretly hated that worked in the factory with him. And Nathan finds out that the dude that he kind of killed, so he kind of swapped lives with him, was actually not going to live very long. He actually had some sort of enlarged blood vessel in his brain and was going to die any moment. So Nathan immediately was like, oh shit. And then the piece from the plane falls through the ceiling and crushes him. Classic Final Destination, a very fun ending. Like I said, a great intro, a great ending, not great in the middle, which kind of knocks this movie down a bit for me. So you could probably already guess, I would disagree with this movie being number 1 on the list. I have this movie actually number 4, but really, I have a good time with every single movie in this franchise. Yeah, the Final Destination, the movie I have in last place. The kills are fun. The rest of the movie is pretty shitty, but especially the movies that I have listed 1 through 4, I have a very good time with it. And this franchise is definitely a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, if you want to call it that. But anyways, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for kind of listening to my review, my thoughts on how Rotten Tomatoes ranks the entire Final Destination franchise. Let me know down in the comments down below how you rank this franchise. Go ahead and check out one of these videos next to me if you want some more content from me right now. And so you don't miss future content, make sure you subscribe to be notified when those future videos go live. But anyways, everybody, thanks again for watching. My name is Matt, and I'll see you in the next one.